There's nothing like parent-child bonding over a warm fire in the middle of the woods, surrounded by nature and Norse gods. In 2018, a semi-reset was hit on the God of War franchise that changed the dynamics of not only the gameplay, but also the story presentation, with a weathered Kratos trying to be a better dad to his son than he was to his original family in Sparta. What came from this gamble of a long-running series was accolades and praises from solo gamers and journalists alike, putting God of War back in the cultural zeitgeist like it was 2005 all over again. But the 2018 release left a lot of questions on the table, and the potential for major gameplay improvements. Like many others, the 2018 iteration left me in awe, and I knew that its sequel would be one of my most anticipated games of not only 2022, but also many years. Begging to the gods, I only hoped that God of War Ragnarok would surpass the heights of a prequel that turned every thought I had about a God of War game into something unrecognizable compared to its predecessors, while setting a standard rarely reached in gaming. The template of God of War 2018 is in its finest form with Ragnarok. Beginning between the secret ending of its predecessor and the fallout of Baldur's death, Kratos and his son Atreus are holed up in their home in Midgard, as it's been enveloped by the coldest of elements, with the rest of the realms affected by Fimbulwinter in various ways. The arrival of Thor and the secret ending of God of War 2018 is a precursor to not only the battle between the God of Thunder and the God of War, but also Odin offering Atreus the chance to work with the All-Father, leaving Kratos behind. What comes from this offer is a conflict between families, understanding the effects of a father's expectations for his offspring, and exploring realms both new and old, including returning to areas Kratos and Atreus ravaged in the last game. Upping the ante in every manner, Ragnarok provides an extensive story with over 40 side missions or favors, being associated with almost every realm. Some favors are simple, such as collecting flowers with no real reward other than experience points. A majority of the game's side quests are small bits of action or puzzle-oriented scenarios where NPCs, including everyone's favorite fountain of knowledge Mimir, comes to terms with their past and have to figure out the next step toward their future. There are hundreds of collectibles, including lore scrolls, buried treasures, and the returning Nornir chest, where the player will be running around a small area of the map searching for 3 pyres needed to break or set ablaze to open a chest housing either rage or health upgrade items, or some special equipment. For players who love the previous game's barbaric battles, Ragnarok doesn't skimp on the combat challenges, with the returning Muspelheim trials pushing the player's skills in terms of patience, timing, switching between weapons, and how fast someone can aim and throw a spirit ball dropped by a fallen enemy into a portal. Replacing the Valkyries as the game's de facto masterfully difficult optional bosses are the Berserkers. These Berserkers have varying degrees of abilities, including one covered in poisonous gas, and a sisterhood of opponents where the strategy of who to take down first becomes trial and error as Kratos falls again and again. Capping off slaughtering each Berserker may be one of the hardest fights in either of the last 2 God of War games, due to the king having all the Berserker abilities and randomly using them after losing about a quarter of health. There is another incredibly hard battle post-story that rivals, if not surpasses, the King Berserker battle, but the strategy for victory is a little easier to grasp due to the foes' combat not evolving mid-battle like King Berserker. After 59 hours while playing on Give Me Balance, the game's equivalent of normal difficulty, I overcame all the grandest adversaries in the 9 realms, attained every necessary collectible and equipment piece, saw the story play out in full including the in-game favors, and celebrated the life of an NPC that will go down in history as one of the all-time greats to earn my 100th Platinum Trophy. Unlike the 2018 version that changed everything about how a God of War game is presented, Ragnarok sticks to what made the previous iteration unique in comparison to the other games in the franchise, while expanding upon the foundation set in 2018 in almost every way. Kratos comes equipped with the ice-based Leviathan axe, his blades of chaos enveloped in flames, and a shield used to block and potentially parry attacks not unblockable, enemy moves indicated by a red circle. The shield also features another defensive mechanism, as certain adversaries have guards or counterattacks that can only be stopped by utilizing a shield break, where the player taps the block button twice in a row quickly, an act that at times can be accidentally used in the heat of battle. About midway through the main narrative, Kratos is given the Draupnir spear. Beyond being a new tool for exploration purposes, the spear adds to Kratos' arsenal in unexpected ways, as he can become a mid to long range fighter, mixing thrown spears that can explode and quick stabbing jabs to keep enemies at bay. One of the biggest expansions in regards to combat is the emphasis on elemental properties: fire, ice, wind, poison, and bifrost. The latter temporarily blocks off a portion of health that goes away completely if damage is taken. In Ragnarok, using elementals is a necessity as it helps stun enemies quicker for those impressive barbaric finishes. Some foes will actually activate elementally based armor, where the player will have to use the opposing element to destroy that extra health, such as the raiders in Midgard being ice based, and only Kratos' Blades of Chaos doing significant damage. This focus on enemy elemental properties offers a deeper layer of combat strategy the previous game only alluded to or barely rewarded. An interesting addition to weapon usage is weapon signature moves, where the player can hold down the triangle button to perform an ice covering charge up for the axe for greater cold damage temporarily, a twirling whirlwind of fire when the blades are equipped, so enemies are inflicted with burn quicker while also extending Kratos' combos, or setting off those thrown spears via the Draupnir. Spartan Rage returns, with the original variation being joined by two more forms. There is the aforementioned Fury version, where Kratos becomes a near invulnerable war machine, knocking off an enemy's health while slowly restoring some of his own. Then there's the Valor Spartan Rage, where the player can use a portion of the rage meter to restore lost health, and, if timed right before Kratos is struck, negates any incoming damage. Sitting between Fury and Valor is Wrath. Depending on what weapon is equipped during a Wrath activation, Kratos will run forward and utilize a damaging maneuver with said weapon at the cost of one rage bar. Atreus comes into this experience a lot more competent as a support character. While running around and doing his own thing during combat, Atreus can be ordered to shoot one of two arrow types at a time: Sonic, a concussive arrow type that can temporarily stun enemies without having to fill up their stun meter, and Sigil, arrows that can stop impossible to hit foes like Wisp, or hex other adversaries to make them more vulnerable to elementals and status effects. Like Kratos' weapons, Atreus' arrows play a major role during exploration by blowing up barrels with the sonic arrows, or creating a chain of fire to light one of those Nornir pyres. There are also other secondary characters that join both Kratos and Atreus during their respective times separated from one another, with someone like Sindri playing the role similar to Atreus in the 2018 God of War, then being a battle-hardened ally. Interestingly enough, Atreus becomes a fully playable character during certain sections, causing the player to completely change up their more up-close playstyle as Kratos to a more long-range, hit-and-run approach, due to Atreus not having the greatest amount of health. Atreus has his own rage meter that allows him to transform into his spirit animal, but his transformation is locked into the Fury category and doesn't expand like his father's. The usage of Atreus in Ragnarok is a further example of how different this iteration is compared to its counterparts, without skimping on the high quality. But the game's combat isn't perfect, mostly thanks to off-screen attacks. Though there are indicators of incoming attacks, there will be many a time when the quickness of a foe is faster than the indicator, especially if the player hasn't turned the camera in that adversary's direction in time. A majority of the time, relying on the audio cues of someone like Mimir will be more beneficial than the indicators themselves. Using the lock-on system can be a blessing and a curse, with it being easier to identify where a fast-moving enemy is, but it stiffens the ability to move the camera and, at times, prevents defensive rolls by moving the protagonist in correlation with the lock-on instead of away from an incoming attack. The soft lock can also be a hindrance when taking on multiple foes, as Kratos may suddenly target an enemy to his left or right instead of continuing the combo on the enemy in front of him. Bosses and mini-bosses are more profound in this one, but possibly not as much as many would have hoped. Certain major foes in the last game are reduced to mostly larger secondary challenges to, rightfully so, showcase that Kratos and Atreus are at greater power and experience levels compared to the last game. Unfortunately, only a few of the real major bosses leave a lasting impression. from a gameplay perspective beyond the optional tougher enemies. Another combat issue correlates with those optional bosses, where they are able to armor through certain attacks, their animations for particular maneuvers can be interrupted, and can land devastating blows on Kratos during the final frames of a runic attack, where Kratos is stuck in an animation that the player can't stop or prevent, with no physical indication of being struck until the player looks down to see a chunk of health is missing. Equipment management is a major implementation in this version by once again expanding upon the previous template. Everything Kratos can equip, be it his weapons or armor, has the ability to be upgraded 8 times to reach a max level of 9. Though most items start above level 1 and grow exponentially as a base number when attained later in the game, such as starting at level 5 or 6. Each weapon has a single slot to equip some type of hilt or knob that not only increases up to 3 of Kratos' 6 base stats, strength, defense, runic, cooldown, vitality, and luck, but also potentially adds some type of passive or active trait to Kratos while the item is equipped, such as one of the axe's knobs having a high luck stat that may temporarily boost Kratos' strength after a kill with the axe. Shields work more like weapons in this game, with each shield having their own traits and innate abilities, while a rond can be equipped to add some type of addition to the shield break ability. Runics return with each offering a special attack, one light, one heavy, for each weapon that can be upgraded up to 3 times with experience points. Relics are a new type of upgradable attack that, depending on what is equipped, offer various offensive and defensive measures, including one relic that leaves behind puddles of poison after the attack's activation initially causes a poisonous explosion, and another that strikes an enemy before temporarily shielding Kratos from a single attack. Armor is more straightforward than the added weapon variety, but will be detrimental on how the player wants to build up their Kratos for battle. It's not always about having the highest level armor equipped, as players will have to weigh what stats they want to increase or decrease, while gaining certain abilities like a particular favorite chest piece that would poison enemies after a successful block or parry. Stat management plays a major role in Ragnarok, thanks to the Amulet of Yggdrasil. With 9 slots that must be repaired by finding particular jewels, some can only be obtained by defeating certain enemies. Players have the option of equipping enchantments that are reliant on having particular stats at a certain threshold. For example, the Remedy of Bifrost enchantment removes small chunks of Bifrost when performing successful attacks, but the perk can only be active if Kratos' defense stat is at 130, thus making it useless to equip if the player doesn't have that stat at the necessary level. There are dozens of enchantments so the player doesn't have to change everything about their loadout to gain some minor or major benefits from the amulet. The skill tree returns as well, with certain abilities being pulled directly from the last game. This version of the skill tree's biggest addition are skill labors. When a player purchases a particular skill, the demand to perform that skill a certain amount of times in combat will unlock a slot, where the player can equip a buff to that skill, be it added damage, upping Kratos' defenses during the skill's usage, making it more elementally powerful, and even helping charge the weapon signature maneuver meter faster. It also must be noted that Atreus and another secondary character can too gain new skills from the skill tree, upgrade their weapons, though only up to level 3, equip runics, and change their summon attacks via the menu. For as impressive as the gameplay additions and features are, nothing compares to Ragnarok's story. Taking place 3 years after the events of God of War 2018, Ragnarok doesn't just focus on the impending Armageddon, courtesy of a prophecy handed down by the people of Atreus' ancestors on his deceased mother's side of the family tree. Kratos, who has grown to appreciate his son's spirit and willingness to be his very best, while reeling him in to avoid his offspring turning into a spoiled brat with divine powers, struggles throughout the narrative in accepting his son is on his own path, even if that path puts him in harm's way. The family conflicts don't begin and end with Kratos and Atreus, as the relationships of Odin and Thor, Thor and his daughter, Freya and her deceased son Balder, and even Mimir being confronted by the figurative ghosts of his past, when he wasn't latched onto Kratos' hip, expand upon the emotional depths witnessed a God of War game ago. Without delving deep into spoilers, Ragnarok provides one of the most emotionally touching, woefully upsetting, and downright heart-wrenching stories seen in a major video game in years, if not ever. The compelling conflicts, learning of perspectives, and strong resolution alongside immaculate pacing and hefty side missions surprisingly doesn't collapse under the weight of lofty ambitions while not losing the heart of what made the previous game so masterful in terms of plot presentation. God of War 2018 alluded to the potential realms to be explored in its sequel, and thankfully, Ragnarok delivers in grand fashion. The semi-open world of Midgard and the Lake of Nines becomes a frozen wasteland after presenting a relaxing sea in the first game. Being only the beginning of the exploration options ranging from the expanded desert sections of Alfheim, Vanaheim's jungle-oriented nature that opens up into a crater suffering from drought, and a dwarf town where Kratos and Atreus practically scare everyone by simply walking around. The varied locales emphasize the graphical powerhouse that is Ragnarok, alongside magnificent character models and lighting. Sound is also remarkable, mostly thanks to the vocal performances of everyone involved, including new castings Ryan Hurst as Thor, Leah Hayes as Angrboda, and Richard Schiff as Odin. When the actual music kicks in, it usually happens during the most harrowing of battles, and really ups the ante during a potential conquering. Technically, Ragnarok is surprisingly not held back by being a cross-generational release. Though the game obviously loads faster on the PS5, frame rate drops and general stability is strong across the board, with two noticeable negative issues happening throughout an entire playthrough, including one soft crash during a mini-boss fight where little progress was lost when reloading the save, and Atreus getting stuck after climbing down a chain that was fixed by fast traveling via the nearby portal. Only one section in particular caused a significant frame rate drop that, thankfully, didn't involve any combat. For as fun and at times flawed as God of War Ragnarok is when in combat, nothing really compares to how masterful the character and story presentation is, while setting a new standard for both the franchise and AAA gaming in a narrative space. There's so much to love about Ragnarok, including the magnificent story, combat options alongside stat building, and the individualization of the 9 realms that actually surpasses the limitations expected when teased over 4 years ago. Due to some slight imperfections mostly associated with the combat and a few technical issues, this isn't the perfect experience, but as close to perfection as one could hope for in this era of Atreus and his brooding father. If you enjoyed the 2018 iteration, this is a must-buy no matter if you have a PS5 or not. Please, for the love of the gods, do not skip on this immaculate experience worthy of the utmost praise.
Winter Freya, the raiders storm out and barging in, and now stalkers spraying in our woods. This isn't. Help them! Surely that's unjammed the wheel.
If we can get anywhere new now. Look, over here. The water's flowing. You got the water flowing.
Only so we might access more of the crater.
Yeah, but with the water flowing, the plants and animals will come back. I think we just healed this place.
It was not my intention.
For goodness sake, brother, just take the win. With the water flowing and new paths open to us, I say we go for a stroll.
We will search. not stroll.
Oh, come off it. You've never enjoyed nature for its own sake? Not just for the treasure you might find?
I mean, treasure's nice too.
You're hopeless. Both of you.